Hello guys and welcome back to Got Questions. Now if you play an instrument or even just know the slightest bit about music, you'll know that every sound an instrument makes is called a note. An easy way to see all the different notes is using a score or simply an instrument, for example a piano, and the notes go up in octaves with 7 individual notes. Usually you'd start from middle C, the center note, and easily go up C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, or go down going C, B, A, G, F, E, D, C. However, there isn't just 7 notes in music, there's actually 12 if we're counting all the sharps and flats each note has. So why do we only go from A to G when there's 12 notes, not just 7? Or even, why do we even have 12 separate notes in music? Should there be more, maybe 14 notes, or should there be less? Today on Got Questions, we're ready to answer exactly this question. Why are there only 12 notes in music, but only 7 letters? But before we go any further, please make sure that you've clicked that red subscribe button down below and have your notifications turned on so that you get notified whenever you think of a brand new question. So, of course, to answer this question, we're going to need to look at where the 7 letters to represent notes in the first place even came from. What began separating different sounds into different notes? In ancient Greece, around 2,500 years ago, a Greek philosopher and mathematician named Pythagoras is thought to have found the first musical notes by translating them into mathematical equations. You'll most likely know all about this guy from school, you know, the one who created all the equation for a triangle a squared plus b squared equals c squared. I'm sure you've heard of it. Well, turns out he was also one of the reasons why we have the 7-letter notes. The legend goes he walked past a blacksmith's shop on the way to work. He heard the percussion of hammers and the other blacksmith's tools banging on the metal. From this, he determined they sounded a lot like musical pitches, in other words, how high or low a note is. From this, he went home and mathematically investigated the sounds that he heard. One experiment he did was take a string and stretch it tightly. If you pluck it, it will make a sound. Pythagoras found that if you want a higher pitch, simply cut the string in half, then pluck it, and the sound will be exactly 1 octave higher. If you wanted to go 1 octave lower, you'd have to double the string, and so on. Similar to how certain instruments do this, for example, a guitar. This gives it a 1:2 or 2:1 ratio, depending on whether you want to go up or down, and it introduces the most universal interval of them all, the octave. From his investigation, Pythagoras found many important musical intervals such as a perfect fifth, a perfect fourth, and of course the main one, the octave. He found that when you combine the intervals, a musical scale is created, as well as the 12 different musical scales, which in other words gave it the 12 different musical notes. Later in history, Rome began studying how the Greeks used the arts, and they found that the ancient Greeks seemed to begin notating songs by using letters of the Greek alphabet. As time went on, music notating became more predominant, simply so people could record different pieces of music they had written. In Western culture, the evolution of music notation and the 12 separate notes found before in an octave began to be all represented by the first 7 letters of the English alphabet. However, this was all just Western culture. Different parts of the world mainly all accepted the octaves, but left the interval between the octaves to have a different number of notes. These divisions could be up to only having 5 notes in 1 octave, to 17, 24, or even 43 notes per octave. Many of these are still used around the world today, however, I'm guessing most of you watching this video have never heard of anything like that before. So why do we mainly only hear the 12-note octave system when the octave is universal and there's mainly divisions? One reason for this is to do with the ratios and mathematics of different notes to create an octave. However, it's kind of complicated to understand and it's just way too complicated to get into in this video. An easier reason for this is to do with Western colonialism and imperialism. Western power began to dominate and spread all around the world, especially during the last millennia. With that, so did Western culture, technology, and ideas. Nowadays, music can spread around the world so easily, and that different countries and cultures have picked up Western culture and have got used to listening to the same 12-note system. And this tradition of using 12 notes in an octave is now kind of like too hard to break because we've been using it for so long. As for the reason why the notes are represented by the 7 letters, we've discussed why English is used simply because it's the most universal language in Western culture, although why C is mainly used rather than A is just another question for a completely other video. But since there's 12 notes, how can we only seem to use 7 letters? The notes we use are the main ones that haven't been sharpened or flattened and are one tone apart instead of one semitone. And the simple reason for that is because it's just way easier. Imagine a keyboard with all the 12 notes, but you went from A all the way to the 12th note of the English alphabet, so ending on L. Now, the main notes, the ones people are most familiar with, as most of the time you won't use a sharpened or flattened note unless it's part of that key, now are really strange. The order is A, C, E, F, H, J, L. That's basically like trying to learn a new times table in a really awkward way. Like counting in twos, but starting from 1, an odd number. We all know our 2 times table, but are we all really that confident starting from 1 and counting in 2? So 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, it's just really weird, and it gradually becomes more and more strange as it goes on. This is kind of similar, but then there's still that weird problem as E and F are still next to each other. So, to be honest, it's just way easier to have the notes that are mainly going to be played, the ones that are lettered, and the less likely notes to be played are the ones that don't have their own individual letter. Especially since most people who start learning to play a new instrument are from a very young age. Having a very simple structure of just the first main 7 notes you'll learn, as you never start with learning sharps or flats, makes more sense to give those 7 notes letters and the rest not giving them letters. So the reason why there is only 12 separate notes and the reason why they're lettered in a certain way is simply because Western culture has found there to only really be 12 notes between each octave because of mathematical reasons. If you go somewhere else in the world, it'll probably be a bit different. However, since Western culture has basically took over the world, everyone's got more used to using these 12 same notes, and the reason why only the first 7 letters of the alphabet are used is just because it is way easier to understand, and it's also a way to write down and record music. But anyway guys, that is the end of the video. I hope you have enjoyed it, and I hope we have answered this question. If you have, make sure that you've liked this video and subscribed to the channel if you haven't already, and tell us in the comment section down below what you think about these 12 notes and what you think of other cultures and how big their octave gaps are. That one about 43 notes, pretty mad, but somewhere around the world people do have 43 separate notes. Tell us also while you're down there any other questions that you have for us here at Got Questions, and make sure that you return every time you've got a question.